Welcome to another This Week in Coworking discussion.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the This Week in Coworking podcast feed. I am your host, Hector Kolonas, and today we have one of the people who you probably should know about if you're in coworking, and if you haven't, that's exactly why we're hosting today's call. Tonya Surman, how are you?
I'm fabulous. Hello, Hector. Such a pleasure to be here.
Absolute pleasure, and I've heard you speak before, and it's always a interesting and honest conversation. And so that is what I'm hoping we're going to have with you today. For people who don't know about you for whatever reason,
Mhm,
your story started, or at least your co-working story, co-working adjacent story,
mhm.
started with the Center of Social Innovation. Could you tell us a little bit more about the CSI and what it was like starting something like that in
2004.
2004? Oh,
2004.
right.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'll give you a kind of a little history from our perspective. So, I've been in the nonprofit sector and the social change, social mission sector for my whole career. And in 2003, there were a bunch of us that were talking about, efficiencies and effectiveness in the nonprofit sector. There's always this kind of question of like, how do we get the nonprofits to be able to do their work better, point blank. And so there was a group of us who came together, five of us, Margie Zeidler, who's the owner of a building in Toronto, Eric Meerkamper, Pat Tobin, and Mary Rowe, and myself. And we came together with this opportunity in one of Margie's buildings to create a shared space. And this idea of shared space is important because we do predate the word co-working. But what it was is there have been many different initiatives around co-location, right? Like
Mhm.
co-location predates all of that. And we were really interested in how to respond to a new report that had come out in Canada that identified that over 85% of the nonprofit sector had budgets of less than $1 million and fewer than 5 staff. And so there was just this acknowledgement that there was so many small organizations. And intuitively, those of us who'd worked in the sector, we saw that all the time. And when it came to like, how did we live that? A $500 leasing cost per month for a photocopier. And those were back in the days when you
Mhm.
actually still needed to have a photocopier, right? You were still folding things in envelopes and sending them in the mail. And so what it occurred to us, like we had a 5,000 square foot space that Margie had in one of her existing buildings. And it became a really interesting question, like what could we do to support small organizations? So we started our collaboration in 2003 and we really got going at the beginning of 2004. And in May, I guess it was um, June 1st, 2004, we opened the doors to 14 organizations in a shared space right at on Spadina Avenue, just north
Mhm.
of Queen in downtown Toronto. And so this little organization, this little group of folks, I was there, and the whole idea was what would happen. The question is, what would happen if we shared? What if we shared photocopiers? What if we shared fax machines? What if we shared offices and kitchens and ideas? And we got ourselves all worked into quite the excitement about how you could actually make the world a better place. And very quickly, we had this internal space. So we were like 14, I guess it was 14 or 13 offices, and then there were all these desks on the inside, and we had shared event space that we were using as meeting rooms and crazy, attempts at soundproofed little divided rooms. It was quite janky. And we started to experiment with the concept of co-working. But at the time, you ready for it? We called it virtual tenancy, Hector. It's true.
Okay.
So
It's a
virtual
very catchy
tenancy.
term.
And it was Richard Hill, who he doesn't even probably know this, but he was our first member to just buy a hot desk, So it
Okay.
was, we were mostly nonprofits. We had some for profits, but not that many. We just went on about our work. So what happened in terms of our growth stories, we opened our doors in June 2004. We did a major expansion in 2007 upstairs. We
Mhm.
then crazily decided to buy our own building in 2010. So we were operating ourselves as a nonprofit social enterprise. And we were revenue generating, always operating as a business, but with those any revenue surpluses, and there were none, reinvested back into the core. And in 2010, we had an opportunity to expand And we found this incredible building at Bathurst and Bloor in Toronto, 36,000 square foot building. And this is when the concept of social entrepreneurship was taking off. And this
Mhm.
idea of more social enterprises, social purpose businesses, like all of the kind of ability to bring environment and economy together, and marginalized employment opportunities. And so we got ourselves very, very into that space. But we ourselves were confronted as a nonprofit. How might we buy a building, and a big one at that? And that is when we created something called the community bond. And the community bond was this, again, I knew nothing about finance at all. So we just made it up. I just said, well,
Mhm.
why can't we take our social capital and
Mhm.
turn it into financial capital? And in fact, that's exactly what we did. We ended up in May 2010 purchasing this building with the help of a loan guarantee from the City of Toronto and the assistance of 60 community investors. And then we opened up our doors to 75 additional members, and we very quickly grew in two locations then to upwards of 400 or 500 organizations. So
Wow.
we had really tapped into the small, that
Mhm.
small little organization. And of course, meanwhile, and this, that's when, these little things were becoming everywhere. And the laptop that I'm currently on, like, we became mobile. And, that period between 2004 and like 2014 was this massive growth of mobility. We could be anywhere. And yeah, that's sort of our founding story. Yeah. Roundabout.
There's so much I want to dig into, but let's
Mhm.
start. There's a lot of people who credit you and CSI for starting co-working, and a
Mhm.
lot of people who get really upset when we celebrate International Co-working Day a year later. How do you feel about the fact that oftentimes you're not always attributed with being part of that founding of co-working?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different reactions to that. One reaction is, we Canadians, we don't take up that much space. And the folks down in the valley, well, they do love to take up a lot of space, don't they? There. So we know that co-working was a term that was coined in 2005, and that's great. They had way sexier branding. I'm not going to deny that. Like, that's a for sure. Um, uh, but I think, what was interesting about when we were doing this, I don't think that we knew really what we were doing. And, it's one of those tensions that I often feel like, which space am I in?
Mhm.
Are we in the co-working space, or are we in the social change space? And, we're called the Center for Social Innovation. Okay. And listen to our mission. Our mission is to catalyze, inspire, and support social innovation. Nowhere does it say co-working, right?
It's true.
So for us, co-working was always the tactic that we employed to get at the change we wanted to see in the world. Our focus has been from day one about building connections, collaborations, and community. So I didn't really care, to be honest. Okay, I'll admit that I got a little pissy when Adam Newman basically ripped off our website verbatim. Go back into the Wayback Machine, and like, that hurt when they offered him billions of dollars to fail. So look, that hurt. I'm going to acknowledge that, but you know what? I live and I sleep very well. As long as you don't call me the grandmother, I'm fine. As long as it's godmother is acceptable, but but it's one of those things where I think there was a hundredth monkey thing going on.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody can really take credit for something that really was emerging in multiple locations all over the
Yeah.
world. People were playing with those ideas, and they were really valuable ideas. I've never seen myself in the co-working space per se.
Mhm.
But I've been so inspired to see what other co-working spaces have been able to do in terms of moving the needle on community and on belonging and on relationships. And, our focus was always primarily in the social impact space. 40% of our members, nonprofits and charities, 40% for profits and social purpose businesses and gig economy, and then about 20% undecided. And the magic has always been in you know, unlocking and proving that new things are possible for new people. And that's where I get my I get my satisfaction from.
I love that. There is
Yeah.
so much that you've taught us about, and we'll dig into this a little bit more in this call. Um, it goes back to kind of my entry into the co-working world back in 2013, and people think I've been in this for ages. When we didn't have a word for it, so we called it rent a desk because
Right.
that's what we were doing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
only years later, I was like, oh, this is a co-working thing. I like that term. But I'm happy that that term came out because this week in rent a desk does not sound cool. And this week in virtual residency also doesn't have the same ring to it. So
Right.
let's celebrate the term. We'll all agree it's a
Exactly.
great term.
Yeah. Exactly.
But you've obviously been in the shared workspace, shared resource world for
Mhm.
a little bit now.
Mhm.
What has absolutely changed since the beginning when you came into this idea of organizations who have nothing else in common other than sharing space, or something in common, but mostly that they share space?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's, first of all, people understand what it is. And so I love not being on the bleeding edge. 2004 was a very, you had to explain it all, you
Mhm,
had to explain it all to people. And so everybody gets it now. That's super fabulous. But I think one of the things that we've been able to do in the co working area is to really move this concept of belonging into like, that there's a solution. We in the field, we the sector, are providing a very concrete and real solution to people as they're struggling with loneliness and not being able to find each other. Um,
mhm.
you know what's changed? Everything, nothing. COVID sure took us for a ring, though. But I think what we're proving is that community matters and relationships matter, and I'm ecstatic. Like when I go to the co-working conferences, I'm just like, I'm tickled. I'm just tickled because it's like, this is it's so important. Um, I mean, we've been around for 22 years now. Okay. So one of the things that I count as my metrics, everybody's got their KPIs, is the number of weddings and the number of babies forthcoming, right? We've been around long enough that we've seen some serious kids come out of this, And so we did a survey many years ago, and he said, CSI changed my life. He said, I found my first job, my first housemate, and my first lover in Canada.
What more could you ask for?
That works for me.
Okay, so then what hasn't changed? What was a fundamental truth back then, 22 years ago, that is still true today?
Keep it practical, right? Like, people, we used to say, oh, people come for the office space and they stay for the connection. That is true. But I think it's also true that if you lose sight of providing practical solutions for people,
Mhm,
that's also death for your business. You've got to really stay connected on the ground with what matters and what are the challenges that folks are facing. And in our case, we're in a big city, but we have a very narrow focus, if you will, right? We primarily work with organizations that are working on climate change and purpose economy and health, education, social purpose, everything you can possibly imagine. But it's very much, you'd have a difficult time feeling comfortable if you were an oil and gas executive walking into CSI. It's
mhm.
just not probably a good fit for you. Now that being said, if you're progressive, love it. Come on in. Can't wait and love to host that conversation because that's where the good stuff happens,
Yep.
Yeah. But I think keeping it real, keeping it practical, and it's all about relationships. Yeah.
Yep, I absolutely adore that, and I completely agree. But it also brings me to another topic where, just like you're very, very focused on the community you serve,
Mhm.
there is this sprout of other niches of types of co-working spaces. Some of
Mhm.
them unstaffed, on-demand spaces, others just for corporate, others
Mhm.
where it's very transactional and that's their jam.
Mhm.
Um, do you feel that having all these different types of shared space is good, or it kind of muddies the water of the community focused spaces like yours?
Hector, you come up with you glom onto a really good idea, and then you don't actually have much control where that idea goes. So
Yep.
accidents happen in those transactional spaces, and I can only hope that that's not where I'm going to put my resources. I'm going to reserve judgment on how other people try to figure out the business model. Look, it's not easy and it's not cheap. Putting
Hmm.
humans into a workspace where you actually have somebody whose full-time job it is to strengthen those relationships does not make business sense, but it
Yep.
makes human sense. And so the question is, why do they exist? And when you walk into a space and you want to join a co-working community, you have to ask yourself, why am I there? What is it? What is my purpose there? If you're looking for a quiet space to hide away from the world, CSI is not a great place to come.
Hmm.
We prioritize, really helping people to reveal who they are and what they have to offer, really intentionally building the kinds of connections that we know will help support them and giving them the opportunity to contribute, because it's not just a service model, it's a contribution model, it's a
Hmm.
reciprocity model. And I knock yourselves out, people. You probably have a better and stronger balance sheet than I do, but I'm going to die with a lot of friends.
Absolutely love that. But you do bring up a very valid point, and that is it's really expensive to do the community side.
Mhm.
And I know many, many amazing people around the world who are building safe spaces,
Mhm.
places where people can come in a world of turmoil to get the support, the community, the infrastructure that they need. But the
Mhm.
money doesn't always follow, right?
Nope.
Especially in certain areas, regions, towns, eras. What can you say to like the sustainability side? Because it's great to have, a full soul,
Mhm.
but when you've got to pay people and pay the rents and pay the mortgages,
Yeah,
how do
it's
you?
brutal. It's brutal. Well, maybe now is a good time to tell you the story of what happened to CSI financially over the
This?
last 22 years, because this is like your reveal all, right?
Yeah.
CSI has been held up as, one of the first co-working spaces in Canada, well, certainly Canada, possibly the world, but really we were also weirdly, we chose the nonprofit route, which meant that we didn't have piles of capital or oodles of, investment or equity supporting us. And we've been bootstrapping since day one, like legit. I had rent checks in my purse before I had a bank account to deposit them in. And we had a break even model from the very get go. We're like, yeah, we're going to bootstrap it, because nobody was going to take a risk on this crazy new idea that, no, unproven. And I
Mhm.
was 30 years old. So, like, what did I know? I was just learning, and I had great co founders, but they were more in the advisory role. And so what happened was we had to bootstrap until we got to the opportunity to buy a building. And then, of course, between 2010 and 2014, we grew so quickly. We went from 7 staff to 70 staff almost overnight. We went from one location to four. We opened up in New York City. We were in the Starrett Lehigh building in Chelsea, Manhattan. We had opened up an initiative in a low income neighborhood called Regent Park. And then we bought our second building, the one that we're currently in right now, 192 Spadina, right across the street from where we originally were founded at 215. And in 20, and everything seemed like we just looked like the rock stars, right? But what was really interesting is we were always looking for our sweet spot. We never actually broke even. Like, we never actually broke even. We were doing projects, taking on this project or that project, or juggling. And I, as
Mhm.
the CEO, I'm like juggling from, project to project to project, trying to make sure that we had enough money to keep going. And in 2019, we had a budget of $12 million. We had four brands. We were TechSoup Canada, Climate Ventures. We were a national network called Social Innovation Canada, and we were the Center for Social Innovation. We had New York and the two buildings we owned in Toronto and the Regent Park. And we had a budget of, say, $12 million and 80 staff by this point. And then COVID hit. And COVID not just was not just devastating for those of us in the co-working space. COVID was devastating for everybody, really, especially in the nonprofit sector, where the entire funding landscape changed dramatically overnight. So we closed our doors for 2 years, right? We're Canadian. We were very conscious, and people weren't coming in, and we lost probably 45% of our members. We created a community rent pool during COVID. But in 2022, just as we thought we were coming out again, Omicron hit us again. In 2022, I'm looking at these different brands that I'm overseeing that had been my juggling, the things that I have to juggle with. And every single one of them was set to lose $500,000 or more. And it was just like, oh, okay, what the hell do we do? Right. And the juggling act had to end. So we very quickly moved into a spin-off mode, right? We went to find new leadership who could lead Social Innovation Canada. We did a partnership to find new leadership for Climate Ventures. Same thing with TechSoup. It, came to a place where I was like, okay, we have to focus on the core. And I was like, oh, New York was the first to go. It was November 2020. It was the first to go. It was pretty fragile.
Yeah.
I'm looking at 2023, I'm looking at this. I'm like, okay, this is crazy. I have to find the sweet spot. And, people were not back to the offices yet. People were very attached to work from home, and interest rates doubled. Woohoo! So I, being so clever, having bought myself 2 buildings, have an $18 million mortgage that I have to service. Well, when you have an $18 million mortgage and your interest rates go from 3% to 6.5%, that costs you $600,000 a year. So we were just like, it was like a free fall kind of craziness. So we made the very tough decision to sell one of the 2 buildings, to consolidate. Okay, you'd think real estate, no problem, sell a building. Turns out
Easy.
nobody wanted the buildings. The market, the real estate market in Toronto had hollowed out. Commercial was devastated. Huge players, huge real estate players were crumbling, falling. Development deals came to an all-out halt. Condo prices have plummeted now. Like it's still mayhem. It's still mayhem. People are still dealing with it. I think this year it's feeling like we're going to get better. But I have to tell you, we went through this whole official process and blah, 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 blah. We were going to, sell this building. Everything was going to be fine. And it took more than 2 years to close on a deal. Meanwhile, my money is draining. Like we've gone now from like 80 staff to like 27 and it's still shrinking. So we finally found a buyer in the form of the city of Toronto. So the same incredible people who gave us the loan guarantee to buy the building in the first place, completely different department, no connection. But they, because we were taking so long and we were such a motivated social purpose seller, I think we were attracted to them, and they closed and last November, and like literally 3 months ago.
Yep.
And they are purchasing it to convert it into an Indigenous homeless shelter. So I can honestly say it was hard for us to say goodbye to this beautiful, beautiful old building. We had 300 or 400 organizations that were there every single day and doing amazing, amazing work. But the opportunity to take the money, the proceeds from that sale, to then pay down the mortgage at the other building, left us with about $1.5 million of debt left. And we raised that debt in community bonds. And now we are 100% community financed. And it's amazing, right? And so to answer your question, we just got our first P&L, our first profit and loss after the sale, and we're going to make it. We found the sweet spot. It's there.
That's amazing. Wow.
Only took me 22 years to figure out what the right size should be.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is, I mean, I was on the edge of my seat the entire, and I think it's the third time I've heard your story from you. So people who don't want to spend 22 years to figure out what that sweet spot is, if you
Yeah.
could sum it down to like, what is it that you were looking for that sweet spot? Is it the size of the space? Is it the business model? Is it the ownership? What is it that
Yeah.
it makes you so confident that this is the start of CSI's next chapter?
It's all of it, right? Like it's actually like it's like there's multiple levers that you're trying to figure out, right? You have to be big enough to generate the revenue to be able to cover your operating costs. You have to be small enough that you're not being stretched in ways that are putting you at risk. The ownership, I think, not servicing $1.5 million of mortgage debt every year is tremendous, right? Like
Mhm.
that owning it outright, um, it's fundamental to our future, right?
Yep.
We still have $8 million of community bond debt, and that's fine. These are my favorite people in the whole wide world. They're the ones who believed in us every step of the way, and they're like, "Keep going, Tonya, keep going." So, you know, we will eventually pay them down and pay that off. But I have to say, I'd almost be sad to lose them, But
Mhm.
I think we just grew so fast between 2010 and 2014, and we were having to do so much, and you just couldn't almost see straight. And so, clearing out, not doing additional projects, really being disciplined, getting down to like, what is the staff you can really afford, and then finding new forms of revenue that don't keep pulling you off in all directions. That's my fault. Like I'm the
Yep.
entrepreneur, right? So, next thing you know, we're developing a new technology solution, and next thing you know, we're doing. And I think that there's something beautiful about being older and being quite satisfied with how life is. Life is okay.
Mhm.
Life is good. I'm never going to be rich. I'm never going to be financially rich. I'm going to be full of joy,
Mhm.
and I have less to prove, and I'm much more interested in just really focusing on doing what we do extremely well. So right sizing the technology, right sizing the operations, right sizing the building, and that can be bigger or smaller. We're now 64,000 square feet. We're at the corner of Queen and Spadina, which is the heart of downtown Toronto. Our building, the one we sold, was definitely an environmental energy efficiency catastrophe. And so it's great the city's buying it because they get to fix it to meet their standards. And, and meanwhile, we have the slightly less leaky of the 100-year-old buildings, and we have the most amazing staff who made it through, right? And the most amazing board, and the community who has stuck with us through all of this is, I mean, they're family, and we grow and we expand and we shrink and we're diversifying and we're getting into new fields and all those things. But I think what really reassures me is just that we're finding the right balance where we're not draining energy, we're
Mhm.
we're accelerating and elevating the energy.
That's amazing. So my last question for you is what what excites you or scares you about what's next for like the co-working industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that anything really scares. I think there's tensions that we should be aware of. That maybe it scares me is I got sucked into, and I think many of us do, this idea that bigger is better. And we've seen the big guys, and they're providing a valuable service. But I'm inspired by some of the stories that we heard at the conference from the smaller towns and the smaller communities. And it's interesting because in downtown Toronto we're a big city, but a smaller focus. Whereas in the smaller towns they can have a bigger focus because they're a smaller town. But I love this sole proprietorship. I love the smaller operation. I love the humanity, the relationships, the immediacy of that, the reciprocity. And I'm scared watching the big guys, if you will, have to lose the humanity in order to scale.
Mhm.
And I know because I tried it. And I lost my relationship with our members. And that's devastating. What does co-working really offer you? Are we in the are we in the photocopier business? Are we in the relationship business? And if you're just trying to like create an efficiency so that you can facilitate some transactions, that's one kind of capitalism. That's one kind of business. If you're aligned like me and probably many others, if your focus is how do we build community and relationship, and how do we model the world we want, how do we use our little piece of the world to bring out the very best in people, in our communities, in our relationships, how do we build that belonging, fight that loneliness, accelerate the impact of the people that are in our worlds, that to me is what we are contributing as individually and as a movement to the world. And so I just hope that we can keep our focus on the relational and recognize that you don't take transactions to your deathbed. You take your friends.
I'm going to stop us here because this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for spending some time with us and for
Thank you.
sharing for all that you've done in the 22 years at CSI. And I cannot wait to see the next chapter.
Thanks, Hector. Such a pleasure to be here with you.